What happens when the CEO of a fast food empire trades his corner office for a beat-up sedan and a drive-through window? What starts as a simple quest for truth becomes a journey of connection, revelation, and transformation. James Carter, the mastermind. Behind Taste Haven, one of America's most iconic fast food chains, is about to discover that the heart of his empire beats not in boardrooms, but in the grease-stained aprons of his frontline workers. Buckle up for a story that will take you from the hum of a busy drive-thru to the pulse of a company reborn. James Carter was no stranger to success. At 45, he had built Taste Haven from a single burger joint in a small Ohio town into a national powerhouse with over 500 locations serving millions of customers daily. His story was the stuff of American dreams. A kid from a working-class family, flipping burgers at 16, who clawed his way to the top through grit, vision, and a knack for knowing what people craved. By 2025, Taste Haven was a household name. Its red and yellow logo synonymous with juicy burgers, crispy fries, and the promise of a quick, satisfying meal. But beneath the polished veneer of success, something gnawed at James. The fast food industry in 2025 was a battlefield. Inflation had driven up the cost of beef, potatoes, and even the paper for takeout bags, forcing chains like Taste Haven to raise prices while battling fierce competition from rivals and delivery apps like DoorDash and Uber Eats. Social media, especially X, was ablaze with posts from fast food workers venting about low wages, grueling shifts, and feeling like cogs in a machine. Customers, too, were vocal, complaining about long wait times and inconsistent service in an era where self-ordering kiosks and AI-driven drive-thrus were supposed to make everything seamless. James had seen the numbers. Sales were steady, but employee turnover was creeping up, and customer satisfaction scores were slipping. Board meetings and quarterly reports painted a picture, but they felt sterile, detached from the reality of the restaurants he had poured his life into. Sitting in his Chicago office, overlooking the city's skyline, James scrolled through X on his phone. A post caught his eye. Working at redacted fast food chain feels like shouting into a void. We see what's broken every day, but corporate doesn't care. Hashtag fast food life. The words hit him like a punch. Was Taste Haven part of this problem? Were his employees, his people, feeling unheard? The reports on his desk didn't mention grease-stained aprons or the chaos of a Saturday night rush. They didn't capture the voices of the cashiers, cooks, and drive-thru workers who kept the empire running. James needed answers, and he needed them raw, unfiltered, and real. The idea came to him in a flash. He would go undercover. No suit, no chauffeur, no corporate badge. Just James, a regular guy pulling up to a Taste Haven drive-thru, seeing the business through the eyes of a customer and hearing the unvarnished truth from his employees. It was risky. EOs didn't just wander into their own restaurants incognito, but James thrived on bold moves. If he was going to fix what was broken, he had to see it for himself. That Friday evening, James stood in front of his mirror, trading his tailored suit for a worn leather jacket, a plain white t-shirt, and dark jeans. A Cubs cap, slightly frayed at the brim, completed the disguise. He borrowed an old Honda Civic from his childhood friend Mike, who raised an eyebrow but didn't ask questions. "Just don't scratch it," Mike teased, tossing him the keys. James grinned, but his heart was pounding. This wasn't just a stunt. It was a mission to reconnect with the soul of Taste Haven. He chose a location in a bustling Chicago suburb, a high-performing store known for its efficiency, but also its high-pressure environment. The area was a microcosm of 2025 America. Families pinching pennies due to inflation, young workers juggling multiple gigs to afford rent, and a constant stream of customers demanding speed and value. The store was a hub of activity, its drive-thru line snaking around the building on weekends, fueled by a recent app-based promotion offering 20% off combo meals. James had read reports about this location. The numbers couldn't capture the energy or the strain of the place. As he merged into the Saturday evening traffic, the hum of the Civic's engine steadied his nerves. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over strip malls and gas stations. James adjusted his cap, his mind racing with questions. Were his employees happy? Were customers getting the experience Taste Haven promised? And most importantly, was he leading the company he thought he was? The answers were waiting just beyond the neon glow of the Taste Haven sign. But there was more at stake than James realized. The fast food industry was under scrutiny. Posts on X had sparked a national conversation about worker rights with hashtags like hashtag raise the wage and hashtag listen to us trending. A recent expose in a major outlet had called out chains for outdated equipment and understaffing, leading to burnout and high turnover. Taste Haven hadn't been named, but James knew it was only a matter of time before the spotlight turned his way. His board of directors was already pressing for cost-cutting measures, more automation, fewer staff to offset rising costs. James, however, had a gut feeling that the solution wasn't in machines but in people. Tonight, he would test that theory. As he pulled into the parking lot, the familiar red and yellow sign loomed ahead, its glow reflecting off the Civic's chipped paint. The drive-through line was long, a testament to the app promotion's success, but James noticed something else. A glitchy self-ordering kiosk flickering in the corner, forcing customers to rely on the overworked staff. He could hear the faint buzz of the speaker and the clatter of the kitchen through the open window. This was it, the front line of his empire. James took a deep breath, flipped on his turn signal, and joined the line. What he didn't know was that this simple visit would uncover a truth that would change Taste Haven forever. One interaction, one voice, would spark a revolution from the ground up. But for now, James was just another guy in a beat-up car, waiting for a burger and answers. The neon glow of the Taste Haven sign bathed the parking lot in a warm, familiar hue, but for James Carter, the scene felt anything but routine. Behind the wheel of a borrowed Honda Civic, its engine humming softly in the Chicago twilight, he was no longer the CEO of a fast food empire. He was just another guy in line, blending into the Saturday evening rush, his heart pounding with a mix of nerves and anticipation. The drive-through line stretched around the building, a testament to Taste Haven's popularity and the pull of a 20% off app promotion that had drawn a crowd. But James wasn't here for a burger. He was here for the truth, the unfiltered reality of the empire he'd built. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of fries and exhaust as James inched forward in the queue. Through the open window, he could hear the chaos of the kitchen, the sizzle of grills, the beep of timers, and a rapid-fire chatter of staff trying to keep up with the onslaught of orders. A digital kiosk in the corner flickered erratically, its screen glitching, a symptom of the over-reliance on automation that had plagued the industry since the post-pandemic push for efficiency. Customers grumbled as they bypassed the broken machine, funneling more pressure onto the drive-through crew. James made a mental note. Asterisk technology's supposed to help, not hinder. Asterisk. He adjusted his frayed Cubs cap, pulling it low to avoid recognition, and glanced at the dashboard clock. 7:42 p.m. Peak hour. When he reached the speaker, a cheerful voice cut through the noise. "Welcome to Taste Haven. What can I get started for you today?" The tone was bright, professional, and surprisingly calm given the frenzy James could sense in the background. It was the kind of voice that made you feel welcome, even in the chaos of a fast food rush. James leaned toward the speaker, keeping his tone casual. "I'll take a classic double cheeseburger combo, large soda. And, can you make the fries extra crispy?" "Extra crispy fries, no problem," the voice replied smoothly. Your total's $12.49. Please pull forward to the next window. The efficiency was impressive, but James was testing more than just the order process. Customization requests like extra crispy often revealed how well a team handled pressure. So far, so good. As he eased the Civic forward, James felt a twinge of excitement. This was his company, his vision playing out in real time. But it wasn't the polished reports or the slick marketing campaigns he was after. He wanted to see the people behind the operation, the ones who turned his dream into reality every day. The line moved slowly, giving him time to observe. A young couple in the car ahead argued playfully about their order, while a delivery driver in a beat-up Prius behind him tapped impatiently on the steering wheel. The world of Taste Haven was alive, messy, and human. When he reached the window, a young man in his early 20s greeted him with a warm smile. His name tag read Ethan. Ethan Miller's uniform wasn't pristine, a faint grease stain marred. His red apron and a bead of sweat glistened on his forehead, but his energy was magnetic. His dark hair peeked out from under a Taste Haven cap, and his eyes crinkled with a kindness that felt genuine, not rehearsed. "Here's your order," Ethan said, handing over a paper bag and a large soda. "Hope you enjoyed. Have a great night." James took the bag, the warmth of the fries seeping through the paper. "Thanks, man," he said, studying Ethan closely. There was something about the kid, his poise, his hustle, that stood out. Despite the chaos behind him, a coworker shouting about a missing order, a fryer beeping insistently, Ethan seemed unfazed, juggling tasks with a quiet confidence. James hesitated, not ready to drive off just yet. He wanted to dig deeper, to see if he could coax out the truth he'd come for. "Hey," James said, leaning slightly out the window. "You guys always this busy?" Ethan chuckled, wiping his hands on his apron. "Pretty much every weekend. The app deal's got a slam tonight. Plus, the kiosk out there's acting up, so it's all hands on deck." His tone was light, but James caught a flicker of exhaustion in his eyes. This was his chance. "Sounds tough," James said, keeping his voice neutral. "You like working here, though?" Ethan paused, his smile faltering for a split second before returning. "Yeah, it's good. The team's solid, and the customers are mostly cool. Just, it's a lot sometimes." He glanced over his shoulder, ensuring no one was listening, then leaned closer to the window. "You ever get the feeling you're just a face in the crowd? Like you're doing your best, but nobody up top really sees it?" James's chest tightened. This was exactly what he'd come to hear, the raw, unfiltered truth. He nodded, encouraging Ethan to continue. "What do you mean?" Ethan shrugged, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Look, don't get me wrong. I love this place. Most of us do. But sometimes it feels like we're just here to sling burgers and go home. We see stuff everyday ways to make things better, But there's no real way to tell the big shots. Like, I've got ideas, but who's gonna listen to a guy at the drive-thru?" James's mind raced. This was gold, exactly the kind of insight he'd been missing from his corner office. "What kind of ideas?" he asked, careful to sound curious rather than probing. Ethan hesitated, then dove in. "Small stuff, like more staff during rushes like this. The fryer's been acting up for weeks, slows everything down. And bigger stuff like, what if we had a way to share ideas without feeling like we're stepping on toes? An app or something. Anonymous, so people can speak up without worrying. It'd make everyone feel heard, Before James could respond, Ethan tilted his head, squinting slightly. You look kind of familiar. Like the guy on the wall in our break room. The CEO, James Carter, right?" He said it half joking, but there was a spark of curiosity in his eyes. James froze for a split second, his heart skipping a beat. Then he laughed, playing it cool. "Do I? Man, I get that a lot. Must be the cap. He tapped the brim of his Cubs hat, deflecting with a grin. Ethan nodded, but his eyes lingered, unconvinced. Well, if you ever run into him or him tell him to give us a way to talk. It'd change things around here. He flashed another smile. But this one carried a weight, a quiet plea. James nodded, his throat tight with emotion. I'll pass it along, he said softly, gripping the steering wheel. He pulled away from the window, the bag of food warm in his lap, but his mind was elsewhere. Ethan's words echoed in his head, raw and honest, exposing a gap in taste. Haven that no spreadsheet could reveal. This kid, barely out of college, had just articulated what James had been missing. A connection to the people who made his company run. As he drove into the night, the Chicago skyline glittering in the distance, James felt a fire ignite within him. Ethan wasn't just a drive-thru worker. He was the heartbeat of Taste Haven, and his voice deserved to be heard. This visit, meant to be a simple reconnaissance, had turned into something far bigger. James knew he couldn't stop here. He had to act, to bridge the gap between the boardroom and the break room. But first, he needed a plan. James Carter gripped the steering wheel of the borrowed Honda Civic, the Chicago skyline fading into the rearview mirror as he drove away from the Taste Haven drive-thru. The paper bag of food sat untouched on the passenger seat, the scent of fries filling the car, but his appetite was gone. Ethan Miller's words echoed in his mind like a persistent drumbeat. Asterisk. It feels like we're just here to sling burgers and go home. If we had a way to share ideas, it'd make everyone feel heard. The honesty in Ethan's voice, the quiet plea behind his warm smile, had struck a chord deep within James. This wasn't just a kid at a drive-thru window. This was the heartbeat of Taste Haven, and James had been deaf to it for too long. The city lights blurred as he navigated the suburban streets, his thoughts racing. He'd built Taste Haven on the promise of quality food and community, but somewhere along the way, the connection to his people, the ones flipping burgers, wiping counters, and greeting customers, had frayed. Boardroom presentations and financial reports couldn't capture the grease-stained reality of a Saturday night rush or the dreams of a 22-year-old like Ethan, who saw ways to make things better but felt invisible. James's chest tightened with a mix of guilt and determination. He'd come looking for answers, and Ethan had handed him a truth he couldn't ignore. Back in his downtown apartment, James tossed his Cubs cap onto the counter and sank into a leather chair, his phone buzzing with notifications. He opened X, scrolling through posts, tagged #FastFoodLife. One caught his eye. Corporate says they care, but they don't know what it's like when the fryer breaks mid-rush or you're short-staffed again. #listen to us. Another read. I love my job, but I'm tired of feeling like a robot. Give us a voice. The sentiments mirrored Ethan's words, amplifying the urgency James felt. Taste Haven wasn't alone in this struggle across America. In 2025, fast food workers were voicing their frustrations online, demanding better wages, conditions, and respect. The industry was at a crossroads, with public scrutiny mounting and competitors like Shake Shack and In-N-Out touting employee-friendly policies to gain an edge. James pulled out his laptop and began digging. He emailed his regional managers, requesting anonymous feedback from store employees, something he'd never done before. The responses trickled in over the next few hours, painting a picture that made his stomach churn. Broken equipment, like the fryer Ethan mentioned, was a recurring issue, slowing down service and frustrating staff. Understaffing during peak hours led to burnout, especially with inflation squeezing workers who juggled multiple jobs to afford rent or tuition. Yet, amidst the complaints, there were glimmers of hope. Employees loved the camaraderie with their teams, took pride in serving customers, and had ideas, brilliant ideas for improving operations. One suggested a loyalty program, tweaked to reduce app-related bottlenecks. Another proposed flexible scheduling to retain part-time workers. James realized these voices weren't just complaints. They were the key to unlocking Taste Haven's potential. But Ethan stood out. James called the store manager, Lisa, pretending to follow up on a customer complaint to avoid blowing his cover. Lisa's voice lit up when she talked about Ethan Miller. "He's a rock star," she said. "Always covering shifts, training new hires, even bringing in snacks for the crew out of his own pocket. Kid's got a good head on his shoulders wants to study business, but can't afford it yet." James's mind flashed back to Ethan's grease-stained apron, his tired but kind eyes. This was no ordinary employee. Ethan was the kind of person who could lead, who could inspire, if only given the chance. The next morning, James convened a discreet meeting with his trusted advisors, Sarah, his coup, and Marcus, the head of operations. He recounted his drive-thru experience, leaving out the part about his disguise to keep the focus on the insights. "We're missing something critical," he said, pacing the conference room. "Our people on the ground, they see things we don't. Ethan, this kid at the Chicago store, suggested an anonymous feedback system. He's right. We need to hear from our employees, not just our managers." Sarah raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "That's a big investment, James. With inflation hitting our margins, the board's pushing for automation kiosks, AI drive-thrus, not more staff programs." Marcus nodded. "They're worried about costs. And honestly, some of these ideas might not pan out." James felt a flicker of frustration. The board's obsession with cutting costs was part of the problem. Automation hadn't saved the Chicago store when the kiosk failed. It was Ethan's hustle that kept the line moving. "This isn't just about cost," James countered. "It's about loyalty, morale, retention. If we lose people like Ethan, we lose our edge. Customers notice. When the staff's miserable." He leaned forward, his voice firm. "I want a pilot program. An app-based feedback system, anonymous, with rewards for the best ideas. Let's start small 10 stores, including Chicago. We'll track morale, turnover, and sales." Sarah scribbled notes, warming to the idea. "We could tie it to our existing employee app. Make it easy for them to submit ideas during breaks. But we'll need to convince the board." Marcus chimed in. "And we'll need to train managers to actually act on the feedback, not just file it away." James nodded, his mind already racing ahead. He saw Ethan's face, heard his plea. Asterisk, make everyone feel heard. This wasn't just a program. It was a promise to bridge the gap between the boardroom and the break room. Over the next week, James dove into the details. He worked late, sketching out the feedback system with the IT team, ensuring it was user-friendly and secure. He researched scholarship programs, thinking of Ethan's dream to study business. The kid deserved a shot, not just for his ideas, but for his heart, the way he showed up for his team day after day. James also faced pushback from the board, who saw the initiative as a risky expense in a time of economic uncertainty. Inflation was squeezing everyone, and investors wanted quick wins, not long-term culture shifts. But James was undeterred. He'd seen the spark in Ethan's eyes, felt the weight of his words. This was about more than profits. It was about people by the end of the week. James had a plan. He'd return to the Chicago store not as a customer, in a Cubs cap, but as the CEO of Taste Haven, ready to announce the feedback program and give credit where it was due. He wanted Ethan to know his voice had been heard, that his ideas were the catalyst for change. But more than that, James wanted to show every employee that Taste Haven wasn't just a job, it was a community, one where every voice mattered. As he prepared for his return, James felt a surge of purpose he hadn't felt in years. Ethan's words had lit a fire, and now it was up to him to fan the flames. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, James felt like he was leading not just a company, but a movement. 2 weeks had passed since James Carter's undercover visit to the Taste Haven in suburban Chicago, but Ethan Miller's words still burned in his mind like a beacon. Asterisk, make everyone feel heard. The young drive-thru worker's plea had ignited a fire in James, one that had fueled late-night planning sessions, heated boardroom debates, and a renewed sense of purpose. Now, standing in front of his office mirror, James adjusted his tailored navy suit, the crisp fabric a stark contrast to the frayed Cubs cap and leather jacket he'd worn that fateful Saturday night. Today, he wasn't hiding. Today, he was James Carter, CEO of Taste Haven, ready to step back into the world he'd built and change it from the ground up. That the drive to the Chicago store felt different this time. No borrowed Honda Civic, no. Disguise. James steered his sleek black SUV through the familiar suburban streets, the Taste Haven sign looming ahead like a lighthouse. His heart raced, not with the nervous excitement of secrecy, but with the weight of responsibility. He wasn't just returning to a restaurant. He was returning to honor a promise to Ethan, to the employees, to the vision he'd had when he started Taste Haven 20 years ago. In his briefcase, he carried the blueprint for a new employee feedback program, inspired by Ethan's suggestion, and a surprise that would change one young man's life forever. The parking lot was buzzing when he arrived. The late afternoon, sun casting long shadows over the line of cars snaking through the drive-thru. The glitchy self-ordering kiosk was still flickering in the corner, a reminder of the challenges the staff faced daily. James parked and took a deep breath, glancing at the Taste Haven logo on the building. This was more than a restaurant. It was a community, and he was about to show its people they mattered. As he stepped through the glass doors, the familiar scent of grilling burgers and fries enveloped him, but the atmosphere shifted instantly. Employees froze mid-task, their eyes widening as they recognized the man in the suit. A cashier whispered to a coworker, "Is that?" The kitchen's clatter quieted, replaced by a low hum of curiosity. James scanned the room, spotting Ethan Miller at the front counter, mid-order, his red apron still bearing the faint grease stain from 2 weeks ago. Ethan's head snapped up, his jaw dropping as he locked eyes with James. For a moment, time seemed to stop. "Ethan, right?" James said, striding forward with a warm smile, extending his hand. "I believe we've met before." Ethan's face flushed crimson, his hands fumbling with a receipt. "Wait, you're James Carter," he stammered, shaking James's hand with a mix of awe and disbelief. "You were the guy in the drive-thru?" A nervous laugh escaped him, his eyes darting to his coworkers, who were now openly staring. James chuckled, clapping Ethan on the shoulder. "Guilty as charged. You gave me some great advice last time I was here, and I couldn't stop thinking about it." He turned to the gathered employees, who had begun to cluster near the counter. There, curiosity palpable. "Mind if I borrow your team for a few minutes?" The store manager, Lisa, emerged from the back, her eyes wide but professional. "Of course, Mr. Carter. Everyone, let's gather round." The staff, about a dozen in all, ranging from teenagers to middle-aged veterans, formed a loose semicircle, their expressions a mix of excitement and uncertainty. James felt a surge of adrenaline. This was the moment he'd been planning for, the moment to bridge the gap between the boardroom and the break room. "Thank you all for what you do," James began, his voice steady but warm. "I've spent years building Taste Haven, but I've realized something. You are the heart of this company. You see things I can't from my office, and 2 weeks ago, one of you reminded me of that." He glanced at Ethan, whose face was now a mix of pride and embarrassment. "Ethan here shared an idea that hit me hard. You all have voices, ideas, and insights that can make Taste Haven better. But we haven't been listening, not the way we should." The room was silent, every eye fixed on James. He pulled a tablet from his briefcase and held it up. Starting today, that changes. We're launching a new employee feedback program, rolling out to 10 stores, including this one. It's an app-based system, completely anonymous, where you can share ideas, concerns, anything you see that can improve Taste Haven for you, for your coworkers, for our customers. The best ideas will be rewarded with bonuses, and we'll recognize your contributions publicly. This isn't just a program, it's a promise that your voices matter. A murmur of excitement rippled through the group. A young cashier, barely 18, raised her hand tentatively. So, we can say anything? Like, if the fryer's breaking down again? A few employees chuckled, and James nodded, grinning. Exactly, he said. If the fryer's slowing you down, tell us. If you've got a way to make the drive-thru faster or the app promotions less chaotic, we want to hear it. This is your company too. The employees exchanged glances, some nodding, others whispering excitedly. James could feel the energy shifting, a spark of hope igniting in the room. But he wasn't done. He turned to Ethan, who was standing quietly, his hands clasped behind his back. Ethan, I owe you a special thank you. Your idea for this feedback system was the spark we needed. But it's not just your ideas that stood out. I learned something else about you. He paused, letting the moment build. You've been covering shifts for your coworkers, staying late to train new hires, even bringing in snacks out of your own pocket. In all my years, I've rarely seen someone with so much heart. Ethan's eyes widened, his cheeks flushing again as his coworkers began to clap, some cheering. James reached into his briefcase and pulled out an envelope, handing it to Ethan. This is for you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. It's a full scholarship to study business management at the University of Illinois. I overheard you talking about your dream to go to college, and I want to make sure you get there. The room erupted in applause, louder this time, as Ethan opened the envelope, his hands trembling. Tears welled in his eyes as he read the letter, his voice barely a whisper. I don't know what to say, thank you. He looked at James, then at his coworkers, who were now crowding around him, offering high fives and hugs. Lisa, the manager, wiped her eyes, beaming with pride. James stepped back, letting the moment belong to Ethan and the team. He watched as the employees began to chatter, some pulling out their phones to download the new feedback app, others already tossing around ideas. We could fix the drive-thru flow if we had one more headset, one said. What about a staff discount for food? Another chimed in. The energy was electric, a testament to the power of being heard. As James prepared to leave, Ethan approached him, still clutching the scholarship letter. Mr. Carter, I didn't think anyone would listen. Thank you for proving me wrong. James smiled, shaking his hand. Keep leading, Ethan. We need people like you. He walked out into the fading daylight, the weight of the moment settling over him. This was just the beginning. The Taste Haven in suburban Chicago was no longer just another fast food joint. In the weeks following James Carter's dramatic return, it became a symbol, a beacon of what could happen when a company truly listened to its people. The announcement of the employee feedback program, sparked by Ethan Miller's candid words at the drive-thru window, had set off a chain reaction that rippled far beyond the grease-stained counters and flickering kiosks. What began as a single undercover visit was transforming Taste Haven, its employees, and even the broader fast food industry in ways James could never have predicted. In the days after his visit, James watched the feedback app light up with activity. The pilot program, launched in 10 stores including Chicago, was a hit. Employees across the chain submitted hundreds of ideas, from practical fixes like upgrading fryers to innovative suggestions like a team shout-out feature on the app to boost morale. One cashier proposed a streamlined app interface to reduce order errors during rushes, while a cook suggested a waste reduction system that could save thousands annually. James spent hours reviewing the submissions, struck by the creativity and passion pouring in from the front lines. These weren't just workers. They were problem solvers, dreamers, and the backbone of Taste Haven's success. The Chicago store, where it all began, became a testing ground for the best ideas. Within a month, the glitchy fryer Ethan had mentioned was replaced, cutting weight. Times during peak hours. An extra staff member was scheduled for weekend rushes, easing the pressure that had once left Ethan and his team frazzled. Sales at the store climbed 8%, and customer satisfaction scores soared as service became faster and friendlier. Employees noticed the difference too. Lisa, the store manager, reported a shift in morale. "People are excited," she told James in a video call. "They're talking about their ideas in the break room, checking the app for updates. It's like they finally feel seen." James nodded, his chest swelling with pride. This was what he'd hoped for, a culture where every voice mattered. For Ethan Miller, the impact was even more profound. The scholarship James had given him a full ride to study business management at the University of Illinois changed the trajectory of his life. At 22, Ethan had been juggling shifts at Taste Haven to pay for community college. His dream of a 4-year degree always just out of reach due to rising tuition costs and inflation's bite. Now, he enrolled in his first semester, balancing classes with part-time shifts at the store. His coworkers treated him like a local hero, teasing him as the guy who got the CEO's attention, but also seeking his advice on their own feedback submissions. Ethan, ever humble, deflected the praise, but his confidence grew. He began jotting down ideas for improving Taste Haven, from staff training modules to a loyalty program tweak that could rival competitors like Chipotle. James didn't let Ethan's potential go unnoticed. He invited him to a regional strategy meeting, a first for a frontline employee. Ethan arrived nervous, his red Taste Haven apron swapped for a borrowed blazer, but his insides stole the show. "We need to make training more hands-on," he said, describing how new hires struggled during rushes. "And the app promos. They're great, but they overwhelm the kitchen when orders pile up." The managers listened, scribbling notes, and James couldn't hide his smile. Ethan wasn't just a worker. He was a leader in the making. The story of James's undercover visit spread like wildfire. A coworker at the Chicago store posted about it on X, sharing a grainy photo of James shaking Ethan's hand. "Our CEO went undercover. Listen to us, and now we've got a voice. Hashtag Taste Haven cares." The post went viral, racking up thousands of likes and reposts. Customers chimed in, praising the Chicago store's improved service, while industry watchers took notice. A fast food insider article titled "Taste Haven's CEO Goes Undercover, a Game Changer?" lauded the feedback program as a bold move in an industry criticized for ignoring workers. The hashtag listen to us, already trending due to broader labor debates, gained new life as Taste Haven's story inspired workers at other chains to demand similar changes. The ripple effect reached beyond Taste Haven. Competing chains, facing their own scrutiny on X and in the media, began piloting feedback programs of their own. A regional burger chain in California launched an employee ideas hub, while a national coffee chain introduced anonymous suggestion boxes. Industry analysts pointed to 2025's economic pressures, rising costs, labor shortages, and customer expectations for seamless service as a wake-up call for fast food giants. James's initiative, born from a single drive-thru conversation, was reshaping the conversation about worker empowerment in an industry long plagued by turnover and burnout. Back at Taste Haven, the feedback program expanded to 50 stores within 3 months, with plans for a nationwide rollout by year's end. Turnover rates dropped by 12%, a significant win in an industry where losing staff was a constant headache. James presented the results to the board, who had initially balked at the program's cost. "This isn't just about morale," he told them, pointing to the sales uptick and reduced training expenses. "It's about building a company that lasts." The board, swayed by the numbers and the media buzz, approved additional investments, including equipment upgrades and a pilot for flexible scheduling to attract part-time workers in a tight labor market. The cultural shift was palpable. Employees began wearing Taste Haven Listens pins, a small but visible sign of the company's new ethos. Customers noticed too, posting on X about friendlier service and shorter wait times. One viral post read, "Taste Haven's burgers air fire, but their staff is the real MVP. Shout out to the Chicago crew. #Taste Haven cares." James read the post late at night, a quiet satisfaction settling over him. He'd always believed Taste Haven was about more than food. It was about people. Now, he was proving it. Ethan, meanwhile, thrived in his dual role as student and employee. He started a study group for coworkers interested in business, sharing what he learned in class. When James visited the Chicago store for a follow-up, he found Ethan training a new hire with the same patience and warmth he'd shown at the drive-thru. "You're going places, Ethan," James said, clapping him on the shoulder. Ethan grinned, his eyes bright. "Just trying to keep up with you, Mr. Carter." The story of James and Ethan became a legend within Taste Haven, retold in training sessions and breakroom chats. It wasn't just about a CEO going undercover. It was about what happened when leaders listened and workers dared to speak. In a world where X posts could spark movements and economic pressures tested every industry, Taste Haven was carving a new path, one built on connection, respect, and the belief that the smallest voices could drive the biggest changes. The Taste Haven story didn't end with a single visit, a scholarship, or even a viral post on X. It became something bigger, a testament to the power of listening, the courage to speak, and the transformations that happen when those two forces collide. James Carter's undercover drive-thru visit, sparked by a restless need to reconnect with his company's heart, had grown into a movement that reshaped Taste Haven and sent ripples through the fast food industry. As the Chicago skyline glittered under a crisp autumn evening in 2025, James stood on a stage at Taste Haven's annual employee appreciation event, looking out at a sea of red and yellow uniforms with Ethan Miller seated in the front row. The journey that began at a drive-thru window had come full circle, and its lessons were just beginning to unfold. James took a moment to survey the crowd. Cashiers, cooks, managers, and delivery drivers from across the country all gathered to celebrate a year of change. The employee feedback program, now rolled out to every Taste Haven location, had transformed the company. Turnover was down, sales were up, and stories of innovation poured in daily. A Texas store's idea for a compostable packaging trial, a New York team's suggestion for a mental health support hotline for staff. But for James, the real victory wasn't in the numbers. It was in the faces before him, people like Ethan, whose voices had been heard, whose dreams had been given wings. "This company isn't mine," James said, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "It's ours. You built it, and you're shaping its future." Ethan, now a business student balancing classes and shifts, stood to applause as James acknowledged him. "This young man reminded me why I started Taste Haven," James said, gesturing to Ethan, who ducked his head, embarrassed but proud. "He showed me that the smallest voices can spark the biggest changes." Ethan caught James's eye, offering a nod of gratitude. Their connection, forged in a fleeting drive-thru moment, had become a symbol of what Taste Haven could be. A connection, forged in a fleeting drive-thru moment, had become a symbol of what Taste Haven could be. place where every worker mattered, where every idea counted. The human element of this story lies in its simplicity and universality. At its core, it's about connection between a CEO and a drive-thru worker, between a company and its people, between a single act of listening and a wave of change. James Carter could have stayed in his office, sifting through reports, but he chose to step into the chaos of a Saturday night rush. Ethan Miller could have kept his thoughts to himself, but he dared to speak, trusting that his words might matter. Their encounter reminds us that leadership isn't about power. It's about empathy. It's about recognizing the humanity in every person, from the boardroom to the break room, and giving them a chance to shine. The lessons from this story resonate far beyond Taste Haven. In 2025, as economic pressures like inflation and labor shortages test businesses and workers alike, the need for connection is more urgent than ever. Social media platforms like X amplify voices, but they also expose gaps between what companies promise and what workers experience, between what customers expect and what employees can deliver. James and Ethan's story teaches us that change starts with listening, not just hearing words, but acting on them. It's a call to leaders to step out of their comfort zones, to workers to speak their truth, and to all of us to build communities where every voice has a place. As James stepped off the stage, Ethan approached him, now more confident than the nervous kid at the drive-thru. "Thanks for believing in me, Mr. Carter," he said, his voice steady. "I'm learning so much in school, but I'm learning even more here about what it means to lead." James smiled, clapping Ethan's shoulder. "You're teaching me too, Ethan. Keep it up." They stood together, watching the crowd mingle, laughter and chatter filling the room. Taste Haven wasn't just a fast food chain anymore. It was a legacy of listening, a proof that the smallest moments could spark the greatest changes. And so, friends, that's the story of James and Ethan, a tale of burgers, dreams, and the power of connection. We hope it moved you as much as it moved us. At Legacy Stories, we're dedicated to sharing tales like this, stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, of moments that change lives and reshape the world. If this story touched your heart, hit that subscribe button on the Legacy Stories channel and join our community. Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from, what inspired you, or how you're making a difference in your own corner of the world. Let's keep the conversation going, because every story, like every voice, matters. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you in the next one.